Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our sixth session of our campaign training series. Tonight's topic is treasurers. Normally, this is the portion where I would tie in how this training plays a role in your campaign. I think in light of tonight's or today's events that I'm going to deviate from that. There was a school shooting in Colorado today. Um, There were shootings all over this country today. Many people will die, including Mr. Kirk. Um, Whether Mr. Kirk's death will finally make Republicans take gun safety serious or not, I don't know. But I think that for many of you, one of the reasons that you might be interested in running for office, or why you're part of this discussion of helping with campaigns, or being a treasurer, or being a candidate, or being a volunteer in any way, this is probably one of those topics that has made you consider your involvement. So I thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to pass it off now to Keith Ribnick, who has successfully led us through this series as our moderator and has done a wonderful job. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Matt, and good evening, everyone. A couple of quick announcements before we begin. If anyone has questions this evening, you can use the Q&A feature, and we will answer the questions after the presentation. This will allow us to capture your questions before the Q&A segment. Next, we will send you a copy of tonight's presentation and our narrative via email in the next few days. And if anyone has questions that are not covered by the webinar, they can email Matt at chair@in4blue.com. All right, I'm delighted to introduce tonight's presenter, Tim Anderson. Tim is the recently elected treasurer for the 4th Congressional District Democratic Party. Tim previously served for 8 years as the treasurer of the Boone County Democratic Party and currently serves as the treasurer for veterans for Indiana PAC. As treasurer of these organizations, Tim helped develop processes and procedures for recording donations and expenditures for Indiana election division reporting purposes, but also, as importantly, for creating reports to help the Boone County Dems executive team manage the organization. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Tim and thank you again, sir. I'll bring up the presentation now.
Thank you, Keith and Matt. I'm Tim Anderson and a member of the 4th District Treasury team. The other team members are Teresa Shearer and Peggy Apple, who were very instrumental in putting this presentation together tonight. Peggy Apple has been a Hendricks County resident since 2019. She is the treasurer for the Karen Whitney for State Representative District 28 campaign. And Peggy was an educator and professor of early childhood education at various colleges and universities for 42 years. Teresa Shearer has been a Hendricks County resident for over 40 years. Teresa spent 37 years with what is now Duke Energy as a trainer and analyst in accounting, information technology, and payroll. She has been the treasurer for Hendricks County Dem since 2020 and was treasurer for a state representative campaign. One of the things, before we get started tonight, I want to read a disclaimer. The information in this presentation is for instructional and educational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. The final authority for campaign finance is the Indiana Election Division of the Secretary of State. There are two main authoritative resources for campaign finance. The first is the Indiana Campaign Finance Manual, which is published every calendar year, which is online. You can download it, keep it readily available, or print it. It's more than 100 pages. There is a ton of information in it. All the forms you need for filing are in the Campaign Finance Manual. Also, the IED, the Indiana Election Division, has 2 staff members that are helpful in answering questions. Angie Nussmeier is co-director of the division, and she represents the Democratic Party. And Abby Taylor is a campaign finance analyst representing the Democratic Party. And both are reachable by phone or email. I suggest if you want to contact them, reach them or send them an email, because that will document your question and it will document your answer. If we can get to slide number 2, Keith. Getting started as a new treasurer. Tonight we're going to talk really about some of the things you need to know on day one, some of the more pertinent things. There's lots of other information about being a treasurer we will not cover tonight, but hopefully in the future we can have more seminars, or we can have opportunities for you to ask questions. We are going to cover a lot of material, and as Keith said earlier, the slides and the narrative, and there's a lot of information in the narrative that I'm presenting tonight, will be available by email. So don't feel like you're going to miss something, because you'll get a chance to read about it later on through the email that we'll be sending out. We're going to talk about ongoing responsibilities. There are many responsibilities, but due to time limitations, we can't cover everything that you may encounter in your duties. But we will cover some of the basics tonight, and hopefully introduce you to the resources available for you to navigate some of the situations treasurers encounter in their duties throughout the election cycle. Also, I'm going to cover closing a campaign. Now, this may seem out of order, since many of you have not even gotten started as a treasurer. However, once a campaign is started, there are many important reports that are filed periodically. And until you formally close that campaign, you are subject to the rules of the IED. Unfortunately, there's fines for noncompliance. You can't just walk away from a campaign once it's closed. I've heard of more penalties for noncompliance with improper shutdown of a campaign than any other reason. So later on, we will talk about closing the campaign, because it is an important thing to know, really, when you get started. If we can go to slide 3. Qualifications. Every treasurer of a campaign finance committee must comply with the following requirements. The treasurer must be a citizen of the United States. The treasurer may not be the chairman of a committee. However, a candidate can serve as both the chairperson and treasurer of the candidate's own committee. The treasurer must be appointed in writing by the chairperson. The treasurer must accept that appointment. And this all is done on different forms, and we'll talk about those forms that you use when you file as a candidate. This written appointment and acceptance then must be filed with the election division or the appropriate county election board. An individual may be a treasurer for more than one campaign committee unless the person is a candidate, and then as a candidate, they can only be the treasurer of their own candidate's committee. The only other requirement is the treasurer of a candidate's committee may not be a member of the county election board. So those are the legal requirements, but I think there's also some character traits that are important for treasurers. I think treasurers typically have to be very detail oriented. I think they have to like numbers. I think they have to be involved. They need to be honest. So if you're a candidate and you're picking your treasurer, you want to not only be sure that you're aligned legally with the qualifications, but look for the type of person that could be a good treasurer for you. They're going to serve as your chief financial officer. Upon election or appointment, you have to register with the proper authority. So there are forms that have to be filed. Candidates file the CFA-1, PACs file CFA-2, and political parties file CFA-3. So once you fill out those proper forms, you have to file then in the proper jurisdiction. County and municipal candidates file with the county clerk. PACs, and political parties that support candidates beyond county boundaries file with the Indiana Election Division of the Secretary of State. We'll talk more about those as we go along. If we can go to slide 4. Slide 4 is I hope everybody can read it. I'll try and point out the things that I'm trying to point out here. This is the CFA1. It's the candidate statement of organization. And this is what you would be filing with your either the county or the Indiana Election Board. So I want to point out a couple things on the form. If you look at section B, section A is obviously about the candidate. Section B then is about the committee, what you're going to name your committee. If you're candidate John Doe, you may want to name your committee Friends of John Doe or something else that's just as catchy. And then you also need to have a chairperson. And the chairperson may be the candidate or it could be someone else. Line 29, we're about halfway down the form. You have to list what your bank is going to be. Now, we're going to talk about the bank account later, but as you're filling out the form, be thinking of the bank that you're going to be using. Where I'm really headed is we talked about appointment of the treasurer. If you get down to section C and line 32, the chairperson is appointing someone to be the treasurer, and we're getting a signature that the committee chairperson has appointed that person. Down in section D, you have acceptance of the appointment. And then if you're the treasurer and you're accepting that, you're going to sign on line 41. And then the forms have to be executed by the chairperson and the candidate. The reason I wanted to take the time for that information all needs to be filled out, and that needs to be filed with the proper jurisdiction as we talked about earlier. All right, so that's the first thing. Let's go to slide 5, Keith. Okay, continuing. The next thing you need to do is you need to get a federal tax ID number. And this can be done online. The reason you need the tax ID number is you will be opening up a bank account, and a bank will not open that account unless they have that ID number, federal tax ID. To open a bank account, there are a lot of regulations that the banks have to follow. And there's a lot of compliance issues that the bank has to be sure they're following. My suggestion is once you determine what bank you want to use, make an appointment with the branch manager. That branch manager will know what those requirements are, and they can lead you through the process. They're very sticky about it. Banks are subject to strict compliance rules, and when setting up bank accounts, it's important to, especially for political parties, to get everything right. When you make your appointment and you go to the bank, you need to bring the following. The county candidate, the county party chair or the candidate and the treasurer must both be present at the same time. I don't think I said that properly. Let's just talk about candidates. The candidate, if they're the chairperson, needs to also come with the treasurer to the bank, bring your ID. Usually a driver's license will work. Bring a copy of the filed CFA1 or CFA3 for a political party. Make sure it's signed by the candidate and the treasurer, as we talked about in the last slide. And then you need proof of filing with the clerk or the IED. You can get that from the clerk of court. When you file your CFA1, take 2 copies with you. Give 1 copy to the clerk, and they'll stamp that as filed. It'll be date stamped with time and that it's been filed. So that's their acceptance of it. And then have them also stamp your copy, because that's a copy that you can take with you, and you will need that when you go to the bank. If you're registering with the Indiana Election Division, you can you file that online, and a day or so later, they will publish that out on their website, and you can download that. So make sure you have those when you go. Of course, you need your federal tax ID number, and you'll need an initial contribution to open the account. They won't open the bank account unless you're putting money into their bank. While you're at the bank, it's a good time to order checks and deposit slips. Also, it's optional, but it's very helpful to obtain a debit card. The debit card can be used for a lot of transactions. It should be a debit card and not a credit card. In some cases, the party chair or the candidate may also wish to have a debit card. I think that's a discussion that the treasurer and that candidate need to have, because the treasurer is responsible for all the transactions, money coming in, money going out. So they are responsible for the debit card expenditures. So you want to be sure that if anyone else besides the treasurer has a debit card, that you require the information, the receipts and so on, come back to the treasurer. The treasurer needs that to book those into the records. Also, while you're there, I would set up online banking. Online banking is great for two reasons. Number one, you can do mobile deposits with it. You're likely to be getting checks throughout the campaign. You want to get those deposited as quickly as possible. And also, you want to be able to see where your bank balance is at any given time, especially with debit cards out and more than one person with a debit card. Those debit card transactions show up on your bank statement online. Also, while you're there, they're going to ask about mailing address for statements and bank notices. I like to think of having a second person receive bank statements. That's a good internal control. It's a way that a second person knows where the bank balances are. And I would also suggest that that second person review bank reconciliations with their treasurer. Let's talk a little bit about sources of donation. So I think everybody knows that cash is one of the main sources, or not a main source, it is a source. But when you take cash, you must also provide a receipt. And on that receipt, you want to record name and address of the donor and the dollar amount. Make sure you give a copy of the receipt to the donor and you retain a receipt for your records. The other thing I do with a receipt like that is write down, what was that donation for? Was it just a general donation, or was it we're selling signs that night or shirts? Whatever that reason was for that cash donation, write that down on the receipt. Checks are very similar. You want to be sure that you record the name and address of the donor and the dollar amount. And I like to think that any cash or checks that you receive should be deposited within 24 business hours. You don't really want to have a deposit laying around very long, especially after an event. It could be several $1,000s, and it needs to get into the bank as quickly as possible. Other sources of donation, Democrats usually like to sign up and accept Act Blue. That can also be done. You can register online. Credit cards, if you decide to take credit cards, and I think you should, you need to find a credit card processor, such as Square. I think there's others out there. Keep in mind, when you take credit cards, you're probably going to pay about a 4% fee for the privilege of using that processor. PayPal, you'll get donations with PayPal. In-kind donations, if you're not familiar with in-kind donations, that's where goods or services are given to the campaign rather than cash or credit cards or whatever. We're going to talk in depth about in-kind donations a little later in the seminar tonight. Also, sales of merchandise. I think most campaigns now have sales for different things, sometimes shirts, buttons, and so on. Just a comment about raffles and gaming. If you're thinking of having a Monte Carlo night or anything like a raffle, you do need a gaming license from the state of Indiana. There's very strict rules on obtaining that license. I'm not going to go into it on this, but you need to be sure to find out about it. You can find it in the Indiana Campaign Finance Manual. So we're talking about a lot of transactions coming into your campaign. So you need to select a method for recording donations and expenses. And there's two reasons for having a way to track those receipts and expenditures. Number one is for internal reporting. I think the treasurer should consider setting up budgets. They want to follow trends. There's times you want to classify your expenses and sources of donations beyond what the state requires, but it's very important to be able to manage the internal reporting, make sure that the chairperson, candidates know exactly where we are financially at any given time. And of course, importantly, external reporting to the clerk of court or the Indiana Election Division, and we'll talk some more detail as we go along on that. So there are a couple of there's several different ways that you can keep track of your finances for the organization. There's a very simple method that can be used for what I would think of as very small campaigns, ones where you're probably not going to have a lot of transactions. And that's simply taking the bank statement, and all items on the bank statement are identified. So you have to identify all the credits, the deposits. You have to identify all the expenditures coming out, such as checks that you've written, debit card transactions, bank fees, whatever. You identify everything that's on your bank statement, and you should do that monthly. The advantage to that is it's basically free, but there are a lot of disadvantages. Number one, you really don't get any internal reporting unless you take that and put it together in a different way manually, for example. Also, donor and vendor addresses must be tracked separately for CFA4 reporting. So for internal reporting, you want to have donor names, but you don't necessarily need the addresses. But when you report to the county clerk or the state, you need to have addresses for vendors and donors. Also, cumulative individual donations over $100 and vendors over $100 for CFA reporting, that would have to be done manually. And when I talk about cumulative thresholds of like $100 for donations, it's not uncommon to have a donor give you $25 in May and $25 in June, maybe $25 in July. So you're getting cumulative. Once that reaches $100, then you have to report that individually on the CFA4 report. Well, you don't always know that unless you have a system for tracking that cumulative threshold. So it's important to have like a separate ledger to keep track of that. So now you're getting into a lot of work. Also, all in-kind donations will not appear on the bank statement, obviously, because they're not cash. Anytime you have a in-kind donation, you have an offsetting expenditure that must be added manually. We'll talk about that a little later on. So I would not recommend the bank statement method to anyone except maybe someone with a very small campaign and has the time to do some manual tracking. A little more sophisticated would be what we call the spreadsheet method. A spreadsheet can be created to capture all donations and expenditures. I think there's a lot of candidates and organizations that do use a spreadsheet. That could be Excel, it could be Google Sheets, really whatever spreadsheet you have. The nice thing about that is fields can be set up to classify and track data that you're going to need, both for internal reporting and for external reporting. The advantages to the spreadsheet method is if you already have the software, it's free. Data can be sorted and internal reports can be created so you can actually get something out of your data. Donor and vendor addresses can be tracked for CFA4 reporting, so you don't have to record it every time you have a transaction. You can keep that on file. And the cumulative thresholds for CFA4 reporting can be sorted. So it really answers quite a few of the problems that you have. Also, here's where I would recommend for larger campaigns and county parties, and that is using accounting software. I'll talk about two that are available. Quicken is one that Teresa Scherer uses with Hendricks County. And as we talk about that, she actually has put together a workbook for how she uses Quicken to to do her reporting. So it is recommended for county parties, larger campaigns. The advantages are, first of all, it creates an accounting discipline. It creates a way that, you have certain transactions, and here's how you're going to handle the transactions as you put them into the software. You can also develop custom reports that can make CFA4 reporting easier. Also, custom reports for internal reporting to the campaign. Donor and vendor addresses can be tracked for CFA4 reporting, and Quicken is easier to learn and use than QuickBooks. I've been using QuickBooks for quite a while, and from what I've heard, Quicken is a little easier. The cost of Quicken is $5.99 to $7.99 per month, so there is a cost, but it's really not prohibitive. QuickBooks Online is something I've been using since 2016. I recommend it for county parties and large campaigns. Has some of the same advantages as Quicken. It does create an accounting discipline. Custom reports can be made for internal and CFA4 reporting. Donor and vendor addresses are easy to track. Cumulative thresholds for CFA4 reporting is easy to track. So you get a lot in that. Disadvantage, the major disadvantage is it's rather expensive. It's $39 per month, which is about $500 annually. So there's an investment there. Also, a certain amount of bookkeeping skills are required. You don't have to be an accountant to use it, but to get all the features out of it, having some bookkeeping skills can be helpful. Let's go to slide 6. All right, let's talk about contributions. A contribution is any donation accepted by a candidates committee and made for the purpose of influencing an Indiana election. So that's pretty wide. A contribution is more than just cash or checks. It also includes gifts of property or services, loans, in-kind contributions, and any other thing of value that's received by the committee. Contributions can be made by individuals, businesses, nonprofit corporations, trade associations, labor organizations, and even regular party committees. Also, one candidate committee can donate to another candidate committee. So contributions come from many sources. One of the things as you track your contributions, make sure you know where those are coming from, because when we do reporting on the CFA4, you need to know. A candidate may contribute to their own campaign, which that's good to know. In-kind contributions, here's where we'll talk about that a little bit. An in-kind contribution is a contribution of things or services, such as posters, billboards, use of an automobile, anything of value that's given by one person to the committee. An in-kind contribution does not include a donation of cash, checks, or promissory notes. An in-kind contribution is reported at fair market value of the goods or services as a contribution. And one of the things you have to remember, for every in-kind contribution you get, you also are going to have an expense at the same value of the contribution. So let me give a couple of examples, and I think both of these are very real. Many times a campaign will want to send out postcards to certain people, and they'll ask for volunteers to write the postcards. And it wouldn't be unusual to write 100 postcards. Well, you need stamps for the postcards. If the volunteer buys the stamps, or if they're not provided, then they get reimbursed. But many times the volunteer will say, look, I'll buy the stamps. And that would then become an in-kind contribution. So if you bought $100 worth of stamps, you would tell the treasurer, I bought $100 worth of stamps. You would provide them with the receipt. The treasurer would then book that as an in-kind contribution in your name as the donor, and also record an expense for the same $100 value, and that expense would be to the post office. because they were for stamps. So in-kind contribution and expense are both at the same value. I'll give you one more example, and I think this is one that maybe doesn't always get reported. During certain times of the campaign, it's possible that you get a whole bunch of signs that need to be sent out to different people, and you get a volunteer that's going to deliver signs, and they may be delivering them throughout the county. They're going to put a lot of miles on their car. That is value to the campaign, and it needs to be reported as in kind if they're not going to get reimbursed for their fuel. So the way that would work is you would the volunteer would keep track of their mileage. They would determine what the reimbursed value is. And my suggestion is IRS has a mileage reimbursement number. I'm not sure how much it is now, but it used to be so many cents per mile. The volunteer that did the driving would track their mileage. They would track the date and how many miles they drove each day, multiply that by the mileage reimbursement figure that they've gotten, put that in an email so that's documented, send it to the treasurer. The treasurer would book that as an in-kind donation and also as an expense in their in their CFA4 reporting. So it really is a situation where I think the stamp thing many times is recognized, but I think the driving around the county is not always, and it really should be. So a couple other things on contributions. There are limitations on contributions. The most significant are corporations and labor organizations. You can find those limitations in the campaign finance manual. Also on the CFA4, contributions are classified by individuals, by PACs, a schedule that are separate: individuals, PACs, labor unions, corporations, and other. That's one of the reasons that you're keeping track of these limitations, so that when you report on the schedule with labor unions or corporations, anybody that would look at the report could see, did they exceed the limitations? Also, this is very important. Personal funds from campaign funds. You got to keep those separate. If a committee accepts contributions or makes expenditures in amount of more than $200, and that's pretty easy to do, in a year, then campaign funds must be segregated from and not commingled with any personal funds of members of the committee. In other words, most candidates are going to need to open up a separate bank account for their campaign. All right, let's talk about expenditures. An expenditure is any payment, transfer, or disbursement of money or things of value to another for political purposes. So again, pretty wide. All expenditures made by a campaign finance committee must be reported on the CFA4 for the period in which the expenditure was made. The dates are very important on that. If a candidate expends the candidate's own personal funds for political purposes, the amounts must be reported as a contribution to the candidates committee and then as an expenditure by the candidates committee. So it's very similar to in-kind. That would be a candidate would buy signs and write a check out of their personal account. The treasurer would then go, we should have used we should have used the campaign funds for that, but they can remedy it by making that contribution in the candidate's name and then an expenditure for the same amount for the signs or whatever they bought. Very quickly, just want to take a quick moment to talk about debts. Debts are, you can picture, this is where all money or things of value that have to be repaid are considered debts until they are repaid or returned. Debts include but are not limited to amounts of money or items borrowed, credit purchases, credit card accounts, and so on. For reporting purposes, if there's any open credit with a vendor or credit cards that have not been paid off, at the end of the reporting period, you have to list that on the CFA4 as a debt. And I can show you that later on. We're going to look at a CFA 4. Let's go to slide 7. I'm going to take a quick drink of water. 7, filing campaign finance reports. The Indiana Campaign Finance Manual contains a calendar of all due dates for campaign finance reports. I suggest that you print this calendar and keep it handy. You're going to refer to it quite often, especially as you know certain dates and times are coming up. And the reason you need to know that is late filing is not excused, and there are daily fines for failure to file. A minute past the due date is an infraction. And I found that out the hard way. The very first report that I had to file with the county clerk, I knew that it was due on Friday, whatever the date was. I didn't pay attention to the fact that it was by noon. And I delivered that report about 20 minutes after noon. And the county clerk immediately told me that I was late in my filing. Now, they didn't pursue that. I didn't have to pay a fine, but I could have. And that was almost 9 or 10 years ago. I think the political climate's changed a little bit. And I think a Republican clerk would love to ding a Democratic candidate or filer if it was late. So word to the wise, it's not just the day it's due, it's the time that it's also due. CFA 4 report. Besides keeping track of the finances of the campaign, filing timely and accurate reports is really the treasurer's primary responsibility. Won't go into a lot of detail on how to fill out that report tonight because it's very time consuming, and we may find a way to have another seminar at some point where we can talk more in depth about that. The CFA 4 report of receipts and expenditures of a political party. The treasurer must file 3 CFA 4 reports every calendar year, a pre-primary, a pre-election, and an annual. And that's for candidates, it's if they appear on the ballot in that particular year. If the candidate's name, if the candidate still has an open campaign and his name does not appear on the ballot in an election held in that calendar year, then the candidates committee is only required to file an annual report. So if you're an active candidate, if you have an open campaign, you continue to file reports, even if you haven't run for a year or two. When filing your campaign finance reports, make sure that you're using currently approved forms. You don't want to use old forms since that could make your report defective. You can find current versions on the campaign finance manual, and also the county clerk has a list of a master list of all the forms that you may need. So let's take a moment to talk about those 3 reports. The pre-primary report is the financial report of a candidates committee that covers the period beginning January 1st of the year till 25 days before the primary election. So that date will change based on when the election is, the primary election. The report then is filed with the election division or county clerk within 7 days of the end of that reporting period. Candidates for state legislative office must file these reports electronically with the Indiana Election Division. Candidates for local or county office can file their campaign reports with the clerk within 7 days. Keep in mind that on that 7th day, it's by noon. Pre-election report. This is going to be probably due sometime in October. The financial report of the candidates committee that covers the period beginning 24 days before the primary election. So they're going back to when you reported for the pre-election or pre-primary up to 25 days before the general election. And this report must be filed with the election division or appropriate county election board, the clerk, 7 days after that reporting period. And then annual report is due approximately 15 days after the end of the calendar year. And that's going to be from the pre-election reporting period to December 31st. If the campaign is open, but the candidate was not on the ballot any time in that reporting year, then their annual report would be January 1st to December 31st. Very quickly, there's 2 other times you may file the CFA4 report. If a treasurer is removed, resigns, or otherwise vacates the position of treasurer of a campaign finance committee, the outgoing treasurer must file a report not later than 30 days after the vacancy occurs. So that only happens if you have a treasurer that's leaving. They would have a special report. The other situation is what they call a final disbands committee report. That would be when you've officially closed your campaign, you've decided that you will not be running in the future, and you would be filing a campaign report no later than noon, 30 days after a candidate's committee disbands. The treasurer files a final CFA4. We're going to talk about that in depth later on. A candidates committee does not automatically disband after an election if the candidate is defeated for office. So if you're a candidate and you sign up and open up a committee in January and you run for election and you're defeated in the primary election, you're not done. You may decide you're not ever going to run again, and you do have to make that decision. But if you decide that you are not going to run, then you would do a final disband committee report. If you don't disband, it may be 3 or 4 years before you'll run again, before that office comes open. You will have to file CFA4 reports every year that your campaign's open. So there's a lot of responsibility. If we can go to slide 8. I've covered a lot of material back behind us, a lot of important information. I just want to remind everybody that all this information I've been covering is going to be available through email. Everybody that's attending the session or anybody that requests it in the future can get the slides, but they can also get a lot of the narrative that I've been talking about. So if it sounds like I'm overwhelming you with all this information, it is available to take a look at. So let's talk about how you can be a successful treasurer. So first of all, you've got to have some good bookkeeping habits. You have to select your bookkeeping method. We talked about the bank statement method, the spreadsheet method, using accounting software. But one of the things that, regardless of the method that you use, I think it's very important to reconcile your bookkeeping ledger to the bank balance on a monthly basis. There's a lot of transactions that are going to come your way, both donations and expenditures. If you wait until right before a report is due, and remember, you only have 7 days from the ending date to where you have to get it filed, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. My suggestion is every month reconcile your bookkeeping ledger to your bank balance. A member of the campaign executive committee should review those bank reconciliations each month. I think that's a good internal control. It prompts the treasurer to make sure that they're staying current if they know that they're going to review their bank reconciliation with a member of the campaign. I also think you should enter all receipts and expenditure items into the CFA4 monthly and reconcile the CFA4 to the bank balance on a monthly basis. Again, you can keep track internally with your bookkeeping method, but you also are going to have reporting, and your bookkeeping method makes your CFA4 reporting much easier. Be sure to back up all your data and maintain all your source documents. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. I like to think I was in finance for 40 years before I retired as a controller, an auditor, and so on. But I think it was important to always be prepared for an audit or a review of your campaign finances at any time. Many times it's not necessarily in the form of an audit or review, but you'll get questions from members of the executive group about how much did we spend for signs? How much did we do this? Where did our donations come from? Did they come from Act Blue? Were they recurring? There's lots of information, and I think that a treasurer should always be prepared. And they can do that by preparing monthly statements, for one thing. So a couple of special considerations. Raffles and charity gaming fundraisers require a gaming commission. We mentioned that earlier. Also, many times events take place where alcohol will be served. If the event's at a public facility that has a liquor license, then you're off the hook because that facility is going to provide the drinks or the alcohol. If you have a venue that does not have a liquor license, then you need to get one from the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission, and there's certain license requirements for that. So keep that in mind. Let's go to slide 9. Okay, slide 9 is how do you do some of the reporting, reporting revenues and expenditures on the CFA4. The Indiana Campaign Finance System is an online system. When you file your CFA1 or CFA3, if you file with Indiana Election Division, the new treasurer will be assigned a user ID by the IED, and you're going to use that in the campaign finance system. So once you get your user ID, they'll give you a temporary password, then you establish your own password and a security question. My other recommendation is once you've got access to the system, enter your transactions in the system at least monthly. Be sure to refer to the Indiana Campaign Finance Manual. It's updated annually, and it's in an election. Every election year, they put out a new one. Let's look at slide 10 is actually a CFA4 that I've been talking about now for probably 45 minutes. Hope you can read it. This one, I hope Matt will forgive me. This is actually a 4th Congressional District's report that Matt filed, but it was filed properly and on time, so I thought maybe you wouldn't mind if we showed it. It is public information. So the thing I want to point out is, number one, look at line 11. This was an annual report. Had it been pre-election or pre-primary, it would say that as the type of report. The reporting period is from 10/12, so that's probably 25 days before the actual election in November through the end of the year, 12/31/24. The other thing that I want to point out is if you look at line 13 and 14, cash on hand at the beginning of the reporting period. So the cash on hand was $4,000 on what would have been October the 11th. But at the beginning of the year, over in column B, it was $5,400. Then going down, there were itemized expenses, itemized contributions. They stay in their proper column A for the period, and column B is year to date. The important thing I wanted to point out is if you go to line 18, close to the bottom, you'll notice that the bank balance at the end of the period and the end of the year to date are the same, and that means that that was filed properly. So that's important. Those have to reconcile. And the other thing is, Matt filed this, I believe it was you, Matt, that I'm not sure if there was another, this is before my time, was filed electronically. And so what you have is he's got proof that it was filed, and it was filed before the due date. So that is the CFA4. So there's also schedules that go back behind the CFA4 for itemized contributions and itemized expenditures. So let's keep going. Let's go to slide 11. Some more things that I recommend for treasurers to do. We've talked about it a little bit, but you need to, execute ongoing accounting and budget reconciliations. Again, bank reconciliations should be monthly, but you should also do budget reconciliations. If you're going to establish a budget for receipts or expenditures, maybe on the top line, how much revenue are we going to bring in this election cycle? So you have a top number. You may also do a budget for events. You're going to have a dinner or a picnic. So what kind of money do you think you'll pull in for that, and what will your expenditures be? There's also some fixed costs that county parties in particular have liability insurance. There's also reoccurring monthly expenditures for website development, different IT things, different software. So you need to make sure you have all those in your budget. Also, on a periodic basis, you need to compare your budget to your actual numbers. You need to understand if you have variances. How did you overestimate this or underestimate certain expenses or donations? So it's important to be able to put a budget together, compare to actual, understand the differences, and be able to explain those differences, those variances, back to the executive committee. Maintain records for all donors. This is very important. Any donor that contributes above a threshold in a calendar year must be itemized on the CFA-4. And those thresholds are $100 for campaigns and PACs, a regular party, a county party or 4th Congressional District, $200 is the threshold. These are cumulative thresholds throughout the year, so you have to have a way to track donors if they're making monthly contributions, because at some point their monthly contribution is going to go over the cumulative threshold. You need to make sure that you have name, address, and if your donor donates over $1,000 in a calendar year, what that occupation of the donor is. That information is all very important. Any donor that does not exceed the threshold that we just mentioned may be reported as an unitemized donor and does not need to have the donor information reported on the CFA-4. But you don't know who's going to exceed the threshold really until you get until they exceed it, or you get towards the end of the year. Just a quick note, non-employee compensation. As a treasurer, IRS does have some regulations that we have to follow. If you have non-employee compensation, and that is an employee that's, a payee that is not a corporation and where taxes have not been withheld, that non-employee needs to fill out a W-9 form. I think most of us have filled things out like that before, and the treasurer must file a 1099. So we are still subject to, we don't have to report our income, and we're not subject to income tax with IRS, but we are subject to non-employee compensation. So if you have questions on that, you need to consult IRS or the Indiana Department of Revenue. Let's go to slide 12, please. Okay, closing a campaign. I mentioned earlier that even though it seems out of order that we would be talking about shutting down the campaign, the reason I want to mention that is it can come on pretty quickly. I use the example of someone, let's say in 2026, in January, if you're going to run in the primary that'll take place in May, you need to get your campaign open. So you're going to do everything you need to do to formally open your campaign. But you could lose that primary. And as a consequence, you decided to give up on politics and, I'm going to close my campaign. Well, you have to close it. You can't just say I'm done. So I'm going to talk about what you need to do. Closing the campaign. So first of all, it's pretty obvious. You've got to cease campaign activity. You've got to stop accepting new contributions. Stop making new expenditures for campaign purposes. If you've got reoccurring debit card charges, you need to get those stopped. You need to, in fact, cancel all your debit cards. Secure all the campaign checks. Make sure you as a treasurer have all the checks. You don't want anybody else writing checks out when you're trying to cease the campaign. Make sure you pay all your outstanding debts and obligations. Confirm that you have all vendor invoices and they've been paid, that you have no more outstanding commitments, no purchase orders that are out there for signs that you thought you were going to need in November. Confirm that all members of the campaign have been reimbursed for any expenditures that they use with their card or that they need to be reimbursed for. The other thing is, you may not think of this right off, but account for all assets. Identify anything of value such as office equipment, tables, signs, flags, anything that were part of your campaign. You need to make sure that you track what those are. Those assets can be donated to charity or transferred to other campaigns or committees at a fair market value, agreed to value, or just if they don't really have a lot of value, you can just give them away. The value and disposition of these assets, if they have value, should be documented on the final report. Make sure that all bank fees are accounted for. You could think you've accounted for everything, but when you close your bank account, you may find out that there's some fees that are involved in closing out the account. Let's go to slide 13, please. So you've done everything to close your account, and now what you need to do is, I'm sorry, I left something out. Basically, what you need to do is you need to calculate any money that's remaining in the bank account, because that's what we're going to call surplus funds. And what are you going to do if you have surplus funds? Well, first of all, you can refund those contributions to individuals or organizations that donated to the campaign. Now, that can be kind of tough, because if you're refunding contributions to certain people, other people are going to, well, why did he get his money back and I didn't? I think there's a better solution to that we'll come to. You can also donate to a 501c3 charitable organization. You could give it to United Way, a food bank, anything that is a good ideal of a Democratic Party person. What's most common, though, is to transfer to another candidate's committee or a local, county, or state political party. So if you lost in the primary, but you have, the Democrat that won, that you might want to contribute your funds to that candidate. Many times the county party will have supported you and given you donations. The county party would probably like to have your surplus funds go to them, because then that can be spread out to other candidates and other expenditures of the county. But anyway, there is an opportunity to transfer to other candidates and political parties. Always refer to the Indiana Campaign Finance Manual if you have any questions in this regard. All right, let's go to slide 14. Okay, so you've accounted for all your assets and your cash. You've dispersed your funds, your surplus funds. Final reporting and account closure. And this is important to follow all the steps. You need to prepare the final disbanding report, the CFA4. The committee is not disbanded until the final CFA report is filed and accepted. Okay, how do you file the report? File the report, your CFA4, with the election authority where the committee is registered. So if you're registered with the Indiana Election Division, you want to be sure that you file that final CFA4 with them. If you filed with the county clerk, you need to make sure that you file with that county clerk your CFA4. And also be sure that if you remember the type of report, be sure that you check the box that says that is final disbands committee. Box is checked. Now, you filed, but you need to receive confirmation of termination. Don't assume you've got to continue to monitor. A campaign committee that filed with the IED, are you going to file that electronically when you do your disbanding? They will then take that in a day or two. They'll publish that on the system, and you'll be able to see that they've actually closed out your campaign. The county clerk is a little different. You're going to take you once again, make 2 copies of the report, take it to the county clerk, have them stamp theirs that they keep, and stamp your copy. That's your proof that the county clerk has accepted your final report and your termination is official. So then, once all that is done, you've officially closed your campaign, then close the bank account, and by that time, hopefully, all your fees and everything's been dispersed. So, lastly, retain all records. My suggestion is that you should hold on to records, source documents for at least 3 years. I would check, you can check with the IRS if you want to see if there's anything else that, any other reason you might want to keep it longer than that, but I think 3 years is sufficient. Make sure you're keeping bank statements, invoices, receipts, and copies of all your filed reports. So it's very important to make sure you officially close your campaign when you're no longer running the campaign. Let's go to slide 15. I went over a lot of information, and I'm sure that at this point your head might be spinning a little bit. Hopefully you stayed with it to the end, but I know there was a lot of information. One of the things that my treasurer colleagues have agreed to do is we will have a hotline for campaign finance questions for 4th District candidates and treasurers. You can contact me by email with any questions you have. Please check with the campaign finance manual maybe first, but email me. Emailing to me, I don't always answer my phone. I have it on silence quite a bit of the time, but I do answer my emails. So if you'll email me, I will let you know that I've received your email. If I can answer it, I'll answer your question right away. If I'm going to have to do a little research, I may let you know. It may take me a day or two. I like email because it documents your question and my answer. And if we have a situation where your question is pertinent to everybody, or could be pertinent to everybody else, it may be something that we want to send out to some other treasurers. The other thing, the other person that is very helpful in this, and I've contacted her before, and that's Abby Taylor. Abby Taylor is the campaign finance analyst for the Democratic Party. You can reach her by phone or by email. And I want to finish up with just one more thing. I want to read the disclaimer one more time. We've covered a lot of information tonight, but the information in this presentation is for instructional and educational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. The final authority for campaign finance is the Indiana Election Division of the Secretary of State. You'll notice I did not include the county clerk as a final authority. If you have questions, and there may be times that you contact me and you have a question and I can't answer it together, we may go to Abby Taylor and get the information. So with that, I want to thank you for your time. Keep in mind that the information we covered tonight is available in slides, and it's also available, my narrative, what I spoke with, is in detail in writing, and that will all be available to you. So I guess with that, Matt, we can move to questions if there are any.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. I also want to thank Peggy and Teresa from your team. It was an excellent presentation. As we move to questions, I want to revisit something that we discussed in session 1 that I probably should have brought up during my introduction to this one, but obviously today's date news kind of led me to go down a different path. When the district was creating this training, we broke up different levels of campaigns into 5 levels. Level 1 is local races, township wide, city wide, town wide. Level 2 is county wide. Level 3 is a state rep or state senate seat. Level 4 is statewide, but non-federal, and then level 5 is federal. This training was developed for those first 3 levels. We developed it for those first 3 levels because the assumption is that if you're running for statewide or federal office, that you will have professional campaign staff. The 4th district is not an FEC or Federal Election Commission registered entity. We do not raise federal funds. Tim is not an expert on federal campaign law. I would recommend that anyone who is considering that or has questions about that consult a lawyer. I will tell you that in my time working with Ambassador Donnelly's congressional campaigns, his fundraising person was always a lawyer. So my recommendation is always, when considering federal election law, go to the person with the law degree. So with that, do we have any questions about Tim's presentation tonight? Well, we're not getting any questions, Tim. So you did a very thorough job. When we talked about this, I usually preface these training sessions by saying that they're the 101 level training. But we knew this one was not going to be the 101 because it requires too much detail and precision. So I want to thank Tim for doing an excellent job at presenting a lot of detailed information. I want to thank his team again, Peggy and Teresa, for their work. And I will see you all a week from tonight. At 7:30, we will have Mary Klinkhouse joining us for our second fundraising presentation, which will be the last presentation of this series. And so next Wednesday, we'll discuss where we're going from here with candidate trainings. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.